I didn't want to go. He didn't want to see me. But orders are orders. We're on the same team, in the same truck, in the same tent, and apparently on the same mattress. Brilliant. The training camp looked exactly like the rumor mill promised. Straight rows of steel-gray barracks, floodlights, glaring against a low, bruised sky, and the wet smell of earth rising after an afternoon rain. Somewhere, a generator coughed like an old smoker. Boots pounded gravel. Whistles shrieked. Every sound said the same thing. Welcome to discipline. By the time I hopped off the transport, my clothes were damp from the mist and my patience was thinner than the camp coffee I'd been fed for 12 hours straight. A clipboard-wielding beta shoved a packet into my hands without looking up. Kel, Omega. You're with Captain Bryce. My stomach did a small, traitorous drop. The Bryce. The one with the reputation for being a blade in a world of teeth, sharp, cold, and guaranteed to cut you if you got too close. I found him by the mess hall, talking to a lieutenant with a face like dried leather. Bryce stood with the kind of stillness that made everything else look jittery. Tall, shoulders squared under a rain-dark jacket, jaw set like granite. His eyes cut to me before I reached them, ice blue, unreadable, and then slid away as if I were a gust of wind that didn't require comment. Captain Bryce, I said, setting my duffel down. Kel. You're assigned Omega. He didn't take my hand. He didn't even offer a nod. We move at 0600, he said, voice cool as the rain. You carry your own weight. Don't be late. Charmed, I muttered. It came out lighter than I felt. The lieutenant, Hale, according to his tag, snorted. You two are gonna be fun. We cut across the yard to the tents. Canvas flapped in the wind like restless flags. Someone laughed too loud near the fire barrels. Someone else swore as a crate slipped in the mud. Bryce walked like the ground made way for him. I walked like the ground, and I were arguing. Because we were. The mud kept trying to claim my boots. I kept pretending it didn't bother me. Inside the tent was a cot frame, a lantern, and one mattress. I blinked, then checked the paperwork again. Nope. One mattress. One. You've got to be kidding, I said. Bryce didn't look up from arranging his gear with surgical precision. Supply error. It'll be corrected when it's corrected. Which is when? After we've both developed spinal issues? He zipped a pouch closed. We'll manage. From outside came a chorus of helpful commentary, because soldiers have the uncanny ability to appear when you least want witnesses. Aw, look at that. Honeymoon suite. Don't forget to leave a sock on the tent pole. Careful, Captain. Omega steel blankets. My face heated. I was not 12. I was not shy. And yet the flush crawled up anyway, fueled by the way Bryce remained perfectly, infuriatingly composed. He didn't bark at them. He didn't defend me. He just didn't react at all, which somehow felt worse. I forced a smile toward the door flap. Hilarious, truly. I'll embroider it on a pillow. The peanut gallery scattered with chuckles. Rain ticked against the canvas like a metronome. I set my duffel down on the far side of the cot frame. We can split it, I said, lengthwise. You take the spine-breaking ridge. I'll take the dignified plunge to the floor. No one's sleeping on the floor, he said, finally meeting my eyes. The blue there was colder up close but not empty, more like lake ice trapping something deep beneath. We're on schedule before dawn. You need rest. I hated that the words landed like an order and a courtesy at once. Noted. I towed the mattress into the center. I don't snore. I don't care, he said, and I believed him. We worked in silence for a while. Him, precise as a metronome, me, pretending I had exactly this under control. My senses kept flaring because that's what I am, what my body does, register, catalog, react. Bryce smelled like rain on cold metal, and a hint of cedar soap. It made my wolf go strangely quiet, which was unfair. I preferred my wolf opinionated. It gave me someone to argue with besides superiors. When the lantern went dim, and the camp settled into that restless hush of too many bodies pretending to be asleep, I slid onto the left half of the mattress and stared at the slanted ceiling. The canvas sighed with every gust. Kel, Bryce said, barely above the rain. Captain? Be on time, he said, and that was all. Something in me bristled. Something else, the tired bone-deep part, wanted to laugh. I swallowed both. I didn't come here to be liked. He didn't ask for me at all. But the orders were written. The tent was zipped, and the mattress was real. My pulse beat an annoyed rhythm in my throat. Fine, I thought. We'll manage. I turned onto my side, back to his careful breathing, and let the rain count me down into a sleep that felt like standing watch. Morning at the training field smelled like sweat, dust, and barked orders. Whistles cut the air like knives, and boots slammed into the packed dirt in rhythms too sharp to be music. The sun hadn't climbed far enough to burn off the mist, so everything felt damp. My shirt, my temper, my sense of personal dignity. Captain Bryce walked beside me without a word. His stride long enough that I had to keep adjusting mine. He carried himself like silence was a weapon he'd mastered. "Morning to you too," I said as we passed the armory. "Get your gear," he replied, flat as the horizon. "Right. Only talking when necessary. Good to know." On the training field, squads were already running drills. Combat forms, endurance tests, obstacle courses that looked designed by someone with a personal grudge against gravity. We joined the nearest group, Bryce giving commands with the efficiency of someone who didn't waste air or syllables. I followed instructions. Mostly. When he said, "Drop for 50, I muttered, "50? What happened to easing in?" Loud enough for the nearest Omega to smother a laugh. Bryce didn't react. Of course he didn't. The man probably had his emotions locked in a safe somewhere. 60, he said instead. I groaned but hit the dirt. Okay, maybe that one was on me. It didn't take long for the usual chorus to start. A few alpha recruits on the far end were watching the Omegas struggle through the climbing wall. Their voices carried just fine. "Careful, don't break a nail. Hey, sweetheart. Need a ladder?" The words slid over my skin like sandpaper, but I kept moving, jaw tight, eyes forward. Giving them the satisfaction of a reaction would have been worse than the insults themselves. "Bet his captain carries him over the top," someone yelled. Bridal style. Laughter cracked through the air like rifle fire. Before I could even decide whether it was worth snapping back, Bryce turned his head. Just slightly. Not a word. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Cold enough to freeze breath mid-air. "Anyone touches him, anyone keeps talking, run until you drop. That's an order." The silence that followed was almost sweet. I hauled myself over the wall, landing hard on the other side. My pulse was loud in my ears, but not from the climb. Great. Now I wasn't even a person worth defending. I was just a line in the rulebook. Protected property. Do not harass. Penalty. Wrath of Captain Bryce. It was stupid to care. He'd shut them up, hadn't he? That was good. That was logical. And yet irritation curled in my chest like smoke. Because they'd been laughing at me, and he hadn't defended me. He'd defended his orders. I brushed the dirt off my palms, biting back every word I wanted to throw at him. Fine. If that was how he wanted to play it, then I'd give him nothing but the same soldier he clearly saw when he looked at me. Even if some traitorous part of me wanted him to see more. Rain came down in uneven bursts, a hard drum roll on the canvas roof of the tent. I'd been half asleep when the first cold drop hit my cheek. The second one slid down the back of my neck. By the third, I was sitting up, swearing under my breath. "Perfect," I muttered, shoving at the damp spot above my head. Just perfect. Bryce didn't even move. He lay on his half of the mattress like the rain had to file paperwork before it was allowed to touch him. "Hey, Captain," I said, poking the sagging canvas. "We've got a problem." He opened his eyes, flat, unreadable blue even in the dark. "Then fix it." "Me." I swung my legs off the bed. "You're the one with all the knots and commands. I'm just the helpless Omega, remember?" One brow ticked up, but he said nothing. The next gust of wind slammed a fresh wave of water through the seam. It splashed across the floor in a way that made my side of the mattress suddenly less appealing. I grabbed my jacket, yanking it on. "Fine. We can both drown in here. Adds to the charm." Outside, voices carried through the rain. Soldiers huddled under the awnings near the fire barrels, warm and dry enough to enjoy the show. Hey look, the honeymoon's off to a rough start. Better get used to it, sweetheart. Marriage is all about leaks. Laughter rolled through the dark like thunder with bad timing. Bryce stood without a word. Just grabbed his coat, stepped past me, and ducked out into the storm like he had a personal grudge against it. I followed because, well, apparently I did have a personal grudge. Against him. Against the whole situation. Against the fact that the mattress was getting wetter by the minute. The wind cut cold across the camp. Bryce climbed onto a crate, reaching the seam in one motion like he'd done this 100 times before. Which, judging by the speed of his hands on the ropes, he probably had. You could say thank you, I called over the rain. He didn't look down. For what? Heroic rescue. The mattress lives another day. No response. Just the scrape of rope against wet canvas. The sharp pull of knots tightening. Lightning flashed, white and brief. That's when I saw it. The long, pale scar running diagonally across his back where his shirt clung to the rain. Not thin, like a blade mark. Broader, jagged, like something had torn him once. I froze. My mouth went dry even in the storm. Because scars tell stories. And that one looked like it didn't have a happy ending. He jumped down, landing lightly for someone built like a wall. The tent roof held steady now, shedding rain instead of swallowing it. Done, he said. I opened my mouth. Closed it again. For once, I had no sarcasm ready. He pushed past me to go inside, all muscle and storm-soaked calm. I stared at the dark line of that scar until the rain blurred it away, wondering why I suddenly wanted to know how a man like him could break, and what it had cost him to stand back up. By the time evening settled over the camp, my throat was raw, and every breath felt like it had been filtered through sandpaper. The rain hadn't done me any favors. Neither had sleeping on a mattress that smelled faintly of mildew despite our heroic patch job. The sky had cleared though. A pale moon climbed over the tree line, and someone lit the fire pit in the center of camp. Smoke curled lazily upward, carrying the sharp scent of burning pine. Soldiers drifted toward the warmth in small groups, voices low, laughter tired. I stayed on the edge of the circle, hunched in my jacket, trying not to look like I was shivering. Omegas didn't get sick, not really. That's what I told myself. So when Bryce dropped a tin plate and a rolled blanket beside me without a word, I blinked like he'd handed me a live grenade. What's this? I asked. Food. He crouched down, setting his own plate across the fire. And something so you stop sounding like a dying engine. I sniffed, both literally and with attitude. What, alphas know how to take care of people? I thought you only gave orders. Don't get used to it, he said, tone flat as always. But there was the faintest twitch at the corner of his mouth, like maybe, just maybe, he knew I was fishing. I pulled the blanket around my shoulders, mostly out of spite, not planning to. For a while we ate in silence. Firelight threw gold across his face, softening the lines I usually associated with barked commands and colder than winter stares. He looked human. That was unsettling. Maybe that's why I said it. So, I began. Do you actually believe Omegas are the weak link, or is that just part of the uniform? His eyes lifted from the fire, slow and deliberate. It's a fact, he said finally. Alphas fight. Betas hold the line. Omegas break. I barked out a laugh that wasn't even close to amused. No. You know what it is? Alphas just can't handle the idea that someone might stand next to them instead of behind them. The words landed harder than I expected. Like rocks against glass. Bryce didn't answer. He didn't even look away. Just sat there, jaw tight, the fire painting sharp edges along his cheekbones. And for the first time since I met him, Captain Bryce looked less like an unshakable wall, and more like someone who'd just taken a hit he hadn't seen coming. I wrapped the blanket tighter, throat sore but strangely satisfied. Because apparently even walls can crack. The training arena was nothing more than a rectangle of packed dirt surrounded by floodlights and shouting. It smelled like dust, sweat, and the kind of anticipation that made your pulse pick up even before you stepped inside. I hadn't planned to fight. Omegas didn't usually volunteer for this kind of spectacle, not when the lineup of opponents looked like they ate nails for breakfast. But then someone on the alpha side grinned too wide and called out, "Hey sweetheart, want us to go easy on you?" And, well, that was that. I climbed into the ring, before my brain caught up with my pride. The alpha waiting for me was taller, broader, all teeth and swagger. He smirked, like the outcome was already carved in stone. "Don't worry," he said loud enough for the crowd to hear. "I won't mess up your pretty face." My smile felt sharp. "Thanks. I won't mess up yours either." Much. The whistle blew. He lunged first, fast, strong, exactly what I expected. I sidestepped, letting his momentum carry him forward, and aimed a quick jab at his ribs. Not hard enough to win. Hard enough to irritate. He swung back, heavier this time. Missed again. Fighting alphas was like dancing with sledgehammers. If you stayed close, you got crushed. If you stayed smart, you made them miss until they were too angry to aim. I stayed smart. The crowd started to notice. A few laughs. A few bets changing hands. My opponent's grin cracked into frustration as I ducked another hit and sent him sprawling face first into the dirt with a well-timed shove. When the final whistle shrieked, I was still on my feet. He wasn't. I didn't raise my arms, or gloat. I just stood there, breathing hard, sweat running down my spine, while the alphas muttered, and the omegas tried not to look too surprised. Across the arena, Bryce leaned against the fence, arms crossed, expression unreadable as ever. And something in me snapped. I stalked toward him, shoving the gate open. "You think we're weak, right?" My voice came out louder than I meant. "That we break easy, like you said by the fire?" His gaze didn't waver. "Then prove it," I snapped. "Prove you're not just some mindless brute who follows orders and calls it strength. Show me you're not just another savage in a uniform." The words hit the air like sparks. The crowd went quiet. Bryce pushed off the fence slowly, each step deliberate as he closed the distance between us. He didn't grab me, didn't shout. He just stopped close enough that I could see the pulse ticking in his jaw. Close enough that the heat coming off him drowned out the cool night air. The arena lights hummed overhead. My heartbeat tried to match them, too fast, too loud. "Careful, Kel," he said finally, voice low enough that only I could hear. "You might not like what you find out." But he didn't back away. Neither did I. The tension crackled between us, electric, waiting for someone to make the next move. The rain had stopped sometime after midnight, leaving the world outside heavy and quiet. Inside the tent, the air felt thicker, close enough to taste. We hadn't spoken since the fight. Since my challenge, my accusations, my stupid pride letting words fly like arrows I couldn't call back. Bryce had walked beside me afterward, silent as always, like nothing had happened. Now we sat on opposite sides of the same mattress, the lantern between us throwing restless shadows across the canvas walls. "You think you scare me?" I finally said, because apparently silence made me reckless. Bryce looked up from untying his boots. "I don't care if I do." "Of course you don't," I snapped. "You don't care about anything, right? Orders, discipline, strength. That's all you are?" His jaw tightened. "And what are you, Kel? A comedian with a death wish?" I laughed, sharp and humorless. "At least I feel something. That did it." He stood, and before my better judgment could drag me back, I stood too. We met in the middle, like the eye of a storm finally snapping loose. 1 second we were glaring. The next his mouth was on mine. Hard, demanding. Angry in a way that shouldn't have made my chest ache the way it did. The mattress creaked under us. My back hit the canvas floor, his weight caging me in without touching more than he had to. It was heat and rain-soaked tension, the taste of challenge on his tongue, the smell of pine smoke still clinging to his jacket. This wasn't gentle. It wasn't sweet. It was years of walls cracking all at once. And then, he broke away. Wait. The word came rough, like it cost him something. He sat back so fast the lantern light caught the scar on his back as his shirt shifted. "No. Not like this." I pushed up on my elbows, heart hammering against my ribs like it wanted out. "What the hell does that mean?" His breathing was uneven. The first real crack in Captain Bryce's perfect control I'd ever seen. "Not out of anger," he said finally, voice low. Not because you're trying to prove something. I'm not doing this if it's wrong. It hit harder than the kiss itself. Because for the first time his eyes didn't look cold or unreadable. They looked haunted. Like whatever line he'd almost crossed, he knew exactly what waited on the other side, and hated it. I didn't have a smart remark. Didn't even have words. So I lay back down on my side of the mattress, facing the wall, pulse still too fast. He sat there for a long time before finally stretching out on his half, the space between us feeling wider than the whole tent. Neither of us slept. Not really. The rain stayed gone, but the silence it left behind was louder than any storm. The obstacle course wound through the woods like it had been designed by someone who hated joy. Ropes hung over muddy pits. Walls rose higher than reasonable. And somewhere in the distance, a whistle kept blaring like it enjoyed our suffering. Teams of 2 moved through the course together, 1 Alpha, 1 Omega, because apparently the command staff believed in cross-type cooperation. Right. Which meant Bryce and I were, once again, stuck with each other. Remember, the instructor barked as we lined up, this is about speed and coordination. You don't leave your partner behind. Bryce gave the faintest snort. Don't slow me down, he said under his breath. I rolled my eyes. Don't trip over your ego. The whistle shrieked. We ran. The first wall came fast, 10 feet high, ropes dangling like taunts. Bryce crouched without even asking, and I used his hands as a boost to grab the lowest rope. My boots hit the top before I even thought about it. Go, he called from below. I dropped the second rope back down for him. He took it in one leap, landing beside me with zero effort, because of course he did. The next part wasn't so easy. The mud pit stretched wide, ropes swinging overhead like jungle vines. A beta ahead of us missed his grip, went face first into the sludge, and came up cursing. Charming, I muttered. Bryce grabbed the nearest rope, swinging across in a clean arc. He turned back. Arm out. Come on. I didn't think, just jumped. His hand caught mine mid-swing, steady, solid, like the laws of physics listened when he told them to behave. We hit the far side together, landing in almost the same rhythm. Behind us someone yelled, "Look at that! Perfect couple form! Don't forget the wedding invitations." Another voice called. Bryce ignored them completely. I tried to. My ears felt warm anyway. Halfway through the course, a younger Omega ahead of us slipped on a rope ladder, dangling by one arm. Before I could shout, Bryce was already there, hauling the kid back up with one arm like it was nothing. I steadied the ladder from below, until the Omega scrambled safely to the top. Thanks, the kid panted, wide-eyed. Keep moving, Bryce said, already turning back to me. The rest blurred, more walls, more mud, more shouted instructions, but somewhere, between the last crawl tunnel and the finish line, I realized I was laughing. Not the sharp defensive kind I usually used. Real laughing. Bryce gave me a quick side glance, like he wasn't sure if I was losing my mind. Maybe I was. Because we crossed the line first, soaked and filthy, and for once the only thing I felt was the weird rush of running beside him instead of against him. Not bad, he said. I grinned before I could stop myself. Careful, Captain. That almost sounded like a compliment. The showers were nothing but a long row of stalls with half-broken doors, and a single line of sputtering pipes overhead. The water ran in uneven spurts, boiling 1 second, freezing the next, and the floor was always slick enough to feel like a lawsuit waiting to happen. I didn't care. After a day of mud, rope burns, and enough bruises to start my own museum exhibit, even half-functional plumbing felt like paradise. The place was almost empty when I got there. Most of the recruits had finished already, leaving only the hiss of water and the echo of footsteps down the concrete corridor. Bryce was sitting on the bench along the far wall, still in his training gear, elbows on his knees. He looked like he hadn't moved since the obstacle course ended. Not showering? I asked, dropping my towel beside him. In a minute. His voice sounded heavier than usual, like it carried something more than words. I raised a brow. Careful, Captain. If you start brooding any harder, the roof might cave in. That earned me half a glance, nothing more. He stayed quiet long enough that I thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, I was 17, he said. When they told me to leave her, the shift in his tone was so sharp I forgot about the dripping pipes. Your mate? I asked carefully. He nodded once. Alpha Council decided she was a political inconvenience. Her family didn't rank high enough. They gave me a choice that wasn't a choice. They didn't say anything. Bryce stared at the floor like it held the memory itself. I walked away because they told me she'd be safer if I did. Because I thought I was strong enough to live with it. The hiss of water filled the silence between us. Finally, he shook his head. All that strength, all that discipline. They tell you it makes you untouchable. But the truth is, his jaw flexed, it just makes you a weapon someone else can use. And I let them. He looked up then, eyes pale and sharp under the harsh lights. But there was nothing cold in them now. Just exhaustion. I don't want to be that weak again, he said quietly. To care about someone and know it can be used to break me. Something in my chest twisted. You're not weak, I said before I even thought about it. You're just alive. The words landed between us like a bridge being built one plank at a time. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The steam curled around us, softening the edges of everything. Walls, voices, reasons to keep pretending we were just soldier and captain. Bryce stood first, pulling his shirt over his head, scars and muscle shifting under the fluorescent light. He stepped under the nearest shower, letting the water hit him like it had something to prove. I followed, slower, my pulse too loud. This wasn't like the night in the tent, anger cracking into something reckless. This was quieter, warmer. When he reached for me, it wasn't rough. Just steady, like he was asking instead of taking. His hand slid behind my neck, pulling me close enough that the water ran over both of us. The kiss was different this time. No sparks flying out of control, just heat, trust. The steady thud of his heart under my palm as if he wanted me to feel it. And for the first time, neither of us pulled away. By the next evening, the rumors had spread through camp like wildfire in dry grass. It started small, someone spotting us leaving the showers together, both of us looking like we'd fought the mud pit and lost. By dinner, the story had grown teeth apparently. Bryce had carried me through the entire obstacle course like some heroic alpha out of a cheap romance novel. By the time the sun set, people were whispering power couple every time we walked past. I didn't mind, mostly because it made Bryce grind his jaw like he was chewing gravel. We ended up near the fire pit again, same circle of warmth and noise as always. Alphas lounged on crates. Omegas traded gossip over tin cups of bitter coffee. And the betas ran the betting pool on whether I was going to survive another day, partnered with Captain Stormcloud himself. Careful, sweetheart, one alpha called when Bryce handed me a plate. You keep looking at him like that. Someone's gonna get jealous. I smirked. Thanks for the warning. I'll tell Bryce to control himself. The circle howled with laughter. Bryce's expression didn't move, but the tips of his ears turned red. I filed that away for later amusement. It didn't stop there. 2 more alphas wandered by, giving Bryce exaggerated salutes. Captain, didn't know you were into team-building exercises after hours. Bryce's eyes went flat and dangerous. Keep walking. They did. Quickly, I bit back a grin until another voice from across the fire yelled, "Hey Omega! You gonna share? Or is Captain Icicle keeping you all to himself?" That did it. Bryce's head snapped around so fast the entire circle went silent for half a beat. I decided to throw gasoline on the fire. "Don't look at him like that," I said loudly, leaning back on my elbows. "He's my partner, not a camp attraction." The laughter came twice as hard this time. A few betas nearly choked on their coffee. Someone muttered, "God, he's gonna kill us all," between gasps. Bryce didn't kill anyone. But he sat down beside me like the fire itself owed him an apology. His shoulders were tight, his jaw tighter, and he handed me my coffee without looking at me, or anyone else, at all. I sipped it, smirking into the steam, because maybe he wasn't saying anything, but the muscle ticking in his temple, and the way his hand brushed mine when I took the cup told me enough. Captain Bryce didn't like sharing attention, and for the first time since I met him, The thought made my chest feel warm, instead of irritated. The training ground looked different at night. Floodlights cut harsh white lines across the dirt, throwing the obstacle towers into sharp relief. The air felt colder, heavier, like even the wind was waiting to see who was going to make it out in one piece. Tonight wasn't practice. Tonight was the final test. Teams had to cross the entire course while carrying a simulated wounded recruit, an actual rookie with enough padding and fake blood to look convincing. Points for speed, efficiency, and keeping your partner alive. Bryce and I got one of the youngest Omegas in the group, barely old enough to shave, eyes wide with nerves as he wrapped an arm around my shoulder. "You're gonna be fine," I told him. "Captain Glare here, and I have a flawless record." Bryce gave me the side eye but didn't argue. The whistle blew. We moved. The first wall came fast. Bryce went up first, hauling the rookie with him like the kid weighed nothing. Then leaning down to grab my hand when my boots slipped on the wet wood. We hit the top together, breathing hard but in sync, and dropped down the far side without losing momentum. Next came the crawl tunnels, mud sucking at our knees while floodlights turned everything into blinding white and black. Bryce went first, carving a path, while I kept the rookie moving, ignoring the way mud found its way into places I didn't want to think about. When one of the other teams ahead of us lost their grip on their wounded beta halfway across the rope bridge, Bryce was there before anyone else moved, steadying the kid with one arm, snapping orders at the panicked alpha partner until they got back on track. We didn't stop to take credit, just kept moving. By the time we hit the last stretch, a sprint through a maze of barriers, the rookie was clinging to my back like a determined backpack, Bryce clearing the path ahead with a precision that made the instructors along the sidelines murmur to each other. We crossed the finish line first. Not just finished. First. The rookie slid off my back, panting hard but grinning. Mud streaked across his face like war paint. "That was, wow, thanks." I clapped him on the shoulder. "Told you. Flawless record." The instructors blew the final whistle. Recruits staggered in behind us, exhausted and muddy. But the point had been made. Alpha, Omega, side by side, no one left behind. When I looked over, Bryce was already watching me. Not his usual cold, measuring stare. Something warmer. Pride maybe. Or recognition. Like he finally saw more than just the loudmouth Omega assigned to his team. Our eyes held for a moment longer than necessary. Long enough for my pulse to skip before I looked away, pretending to check on the rookie. But the heat in Bryce's gaze stayed with me, bright as the floodlights overhead. The camp looked different after the final test, quieter, like even the floodlights had dimmed a little. Most recruits were celebrating in the mess hall, but Bryce had asked me to meet him in the command building. Late evening meant the place was nearly empty. A single lamp burned on the table where he stood, a stack of papers in front of him. His posture was the same as always, straight, steady, controlled. But something in his face was lighter. "I put in my resignation," he said without preamble. I blinked. "You what?" "Leaving the army," Bryce repeated. His tone was calm, but his hands curled into fists on the table, like he was bracing for impact. My brain scrambled. Just like that? Captain duty above all, Bryce calling it quits? His mouth almost twitched. "I'm done fighting someone else's battles. I want to build something instead. For us, for others like us." I crossed my arms, suspicious. "Like, what? A knitting club for traumatized soldiers?" "A center," he said simply, "for wolves who've been used up and left behind. A place to train, heal, start over." He paused. No ranks. No council breathing down our necks. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. "And you're telling me because I want you there," Bryce said. I froze. There were about 50 things I could have said, half of them sarcastic, but none of them made it out. Instead I managed, "Out of obligation? Because I'm the Omega who survived your training schedule without dying?" His eyes held mine across the lamplight, steady and unflinching. "Not obligation. Choice." He stepped closer, boots silent on the old floorboards. "I want you there because I want you there, Kel. Not as a soldier. Not as a partner on some assignment." His jaw tightened before he added, "Because you're the only person I don't feel like a weapon around." That hit harder than I expected. I tried for humor anyway, because that was safer. "You really know how to make a guy feel special, Captain." His expression didn't change, but his voice softened just enough to make my pulse stutter. "I want you beside me. Not because someone ordered it. Because you choose to be." The room went quiet except for the hum of the old lamp. I wanted to tell him he was crazy, that we'd kill each other inside a week, that I didn't know how to be wanted like that. Instead, I just stood there, heart hammering, and realized I wasn't looking for an excuse to say no. The new center didn't look like the camps we'd spent weeks sweating and bleeding in. No fences, no floodlights, no shouting sergeants. Just a wide two-story cabin tucked between pine trees, its walls built from warm timber that smelled like sap and fresh varnish. Windows glowed with soft yellow light. Smoke curled from a stone chimney into the cold evening air. Inside, the fireplace crackled, heat spilling across polished floors and open hallways. A few recruits, no, not recruits anymore, just people, were laughing. Near the long wooden tables, mugs of coffee steaming in their hands. Some were soldiers Bryce had trained, others were wolves like me. The ones who'd slipped through the cracks and needed somewhere to land. Bryce stood beside me at the entrance, arms crossed, scanning the room, like he was still in command even though this wasn't an army anymore. "Not bad," I said, bumping his shoulder lightly. "For a guy who used to bark orders for a living, you almost built something cozy." His mouth twitched. "Don't tell anyone. I have a reputation to maintain." We moved through the room together, people greeting us with nods, claps on the shoulder. Someone handed me a mug of cider so hot it nearly burned my fingers. Another asked Bryce where the sleeping quarters were, and he gestured toward the back hallway. "Plenty of beds," he said. I arched a brow at him. "Plural? That's new." That earned me a look, one of those looks, the kind where his eyes said, "Don't start," even though the corner of his mouth betrayed him. I grinned anyway. "Just checking, because last time, there was one mattress and zero discussion." A couple of the younger wolves overheard and started laughing. "One mattress? Seriously?" Bryce sighed like a man learning patience late in life. "It was a supply issue." "Sure it was," I said, hiding my smirk behind the rim of my mug. The warmth from the fire, the sound of voices filling the hall, the smell of wood and smoke. It felt nothing like the camp where we'd met. Nothing like the cold discipline that had defined so much of our lives before this. Bryce rested a hand on the back of my neck, just for a moment, grounding and warm. "This place will be different," he said. I believed him. Later, when the crowd thinned and the fire burned low, I stood by the window, watching the snow start to gather on the dark pines outside. Bryce joined me quietly, close enough that our shoulders touched. I took a slow breath, cider sweet on my tongue, and said the words that had been circling in my head since the day this started. I didn't want to go, he didn't want to see me. And now we're building a home. For two. I looked at him, letting the warmth settle in my chest. "Welcome,"